And you are live.
Thanks, Cindy. Good evening. Welcome to the public work session of the Rochester Community Schools Board of Education. I would like to call this work session to order at 7:01 p.m. And to begin, I would like to invite a very special guest. We have Sienna Ray. Sienna is a North Hill Elementary fourth grader. And I'm going to invite Sienna to join me here and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Sienna, go ahead and take it away.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks so much, Sienna. Appreciate you being here. Have a good rest of your night.
Hi.
So again, welcome to all who are watching. And I would like to start this meeting by turning the floor over to our Deputy Superintendent, Debbie Fragomeni. I understand she has a few things to say before we get started.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam President. Good evening to the board members. Good evening to the community and to our staff who are watching this evening. We look forward to having conversation with you. But before we do begin our conversation, it was very important for my colleagues and I to take a moment to recognize the service and contribution of our Board of Education. Under the complexities of the experiences as we're 11 months into this pandemic, our focus has been laser focused in on doing what we need to do to bring our children back. But it's very important for our administrative team, all of Team Rochester, 80 plus colleagues, to take a moment to let you know as a Board of Education how your service and contribution has contributed to our journey moving forward together and our gratitude to you. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to a brief video that recognizes the true contribution that each member of this Board of Education adds to our community. So thank you.
Good evening to the Rochester Community Schools Board of Education. Team Rochester is so excited to share a very special surprise with you. We are sending you our deepest gratitude for your dedication, your commitment, and your everlasting support. We would like to honor you with the best seats in the house. Joanne Baydoun, the director of the Rochester Community Schools Foundation, would like to share some more information with you. And then our high school principals, Neil DeLuca, Pasquale Cusmano, and Brian Shelson will be showing you where your seats are going to be located.
Hi, I'm Joanne, and on behalf of the Rochester Community Schools Foundation Board, we were pleased to accept a generous donation from our outstanding team of administrators to honor each and every member of the Board of Education. Team Rochester made a generous donation to the Best Seat in the House campaign, which allowed for a personalized plate to be installed in each of our high school auditoriums. The donation also supports the arts for the Rochester Community Schools students. Thank you so much for your service.
To our school board members, we want to say you now have the best seat in the house. These 7 seats at the front row will have your names inscribed on them. Thank you for all that you do. To our wonderful Board of Education members, you will always have a reserved seat at Adams High School. These 7 seats in our auditorium will forever have your names inscribed. Thank you for everything you do for our school community.
Good evening and welcome to Stony Creek High School. My name is Brian Shelson, principal at Stony Creek, and tonight we want to thank our amazing School Board of Education and welcome them to the best seats in the house. Here in the auditorium and across the district, they will be welcomed with their names on seats of the best seats in the house at our auditoriums at all 3 high schools. We want to thank them again for all their work and welcome them to future performances at all our schools. Thank you again, school board. Have a great evening.
On behalf of Rochester Community Schools, to our Board of Education, please accept our gratitude and appreciation for your service, for your contribution, for your dedicated hours of volunteering. And please know that there are 7 seats side by side, just as you have led us through this pandemic and will continue to lead us forward. On behalf of Team Rochester, I'm just incredibly proud to say thank you. And we are very proud to share this journey and to keep our compelling why our students always. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you to all the members of Team Rochester, Mr. Shelson, Mr. DeLuca, Mr. Cusmano, and the whole team. On behalf of the board, definitely not necessary or expected, really not necessary, but very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Team Rochester, for being here to start this meeting. We appreciate you very much.
With that, I'd like to begin the meeting with a roll call. All members of the Board of Education are present. And I'd like to again welcome the community to the work session. Tonight, there's one main topic on our agenda, and that is the Return to Learn update that will be presented by members of the administration. There will be no business items voted on tonight at this meeting, at this work session. At the conclusion of our work session, we do have time for members of the public to offer comments. If you wish to comment and you're here in Zoom, please click the raise hand button and we will send you a form to fill out. We will call on you at the end of the meeting. As a reminder, you have 3 minutes to speak. The next item on our agenda is communications. And Michelle, I'm going to turn that over to you. We have no citizens who have requested to speak at this meeting. So next item is the secretary report.
Good evening. Before I talk about the communications we've received, I'd like to let everyone know that beginning this week and going forward, we plan to include our responses to communications from the community in our Board of Education meeting packet when the topic is not one we plan to address at our meeting, and we feel others in the community may benefit from hearing a response as well. Now, since our last meeting, the Board of Ed has received 9 communications through the RCS website. The first one was from district parent Marissa Miller. She contacted the board regarding the hybrid schedule and asynchronous learning. District parent Meredith McCutcheon contacted the board regarding the agenda of the January 11th board meeting and comments made during the January 11th board meeting. District parent Amy Ackerman contacted the board regarding COVID test results and shared an article. District parent Chad Smith contacted the board regarding the return to in-person learning. District parent David Bertochnik contacted the board regarding in-person board meetings. District parent Julie Benzenbauer contacted the board regarding her appreciation and support of the board. District parent Michael Vicasi contacted the board regarding her appreciation, regarding academic achievement and honors criteria. Bruce Fielk contacted the board regarding a staff email about the inauguration. We also received emails from the following 11 individuals that did not come through the RCS website: Jenny Hallway, Andrew Weaver, David Recknagel, Melissa Haddad, Christine Larkins, Meredith McCutcheon, Brad Scott, Patrick Wood, Jennifer Foster, Kara Fouts, and Dawn Schultz. And that's the end of the communications that we all received.
Thank you. Did any other board members have communications that they'd like to speak to? If so, just speak up. I can't see all of you here. Michelle.
I received one from Megan Murphy regarding the return to full-time instruction, face-to-face.
Okay. Any other board members? I received emails from Sarah Bakeman about a recording of the meeting, Matt Mullen sharing ideas and feedback, Kim Kelly expressing support, David Recknagel sharing feedback and ideas, Peter Andrews sharing research and feedback, Julie Parks sharing research. I received an email from Oakland County Commissioner Tom Kuhn regarding water fountains. Received email communications from State Representative Mark Tisdall and Oakland County Commissioner Adam Kokendorfer. We're trying to set up a meeting. We actually did set up a meeting. It had to be rescheduled. I'm looking forward to meeting with them about our plans for returning to in-person learning. I received an email inquiry from Mary Beth Almond, a reporter with the Rochester Post, seeking comment for a story. And I'd like to include that email as part of the official minutes for this meeting. I'd also like, and would also like to include my response too in the minutes. I'd also like to include for the minutes inquiries from reporters from the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News seeking comment over the past month on stories. I hope that the inclusion of these emails will clear up some confusion in the community about who prompted the stories, as well as the exact statements that were given. Those will be part of the minutes. With that, I think we're moving on from our communication section to the work session. We have one item to talk about, and that is a return to learn update. And I am super proud to turn this over to our Deputy Superintendent, Debbie Fragomeni, to take us through this presentation. And one more thing to my board colleagues, feel free to step in with questions at any point tonight.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you to our community, to our Board of Education, and to my colleagues that are watching, which are the employees of this district. What I'd like to clarify as we begin our Learning Forward update with this work session is that the framework of this discussion is a work session. This is an opportunity for the Board of Education to receive accurate, timely information so that conversations can begin, conversations of the planning and the committee work that's being done can be put underway. This is not an evening where we're asking for a confirmed recommendation. This is part of the journey. And so I wanted to reiterate that before we start, because there's no decision making being put into place tonight. What is being put forward tonight that I have articulated to the employees of Rochester is this is the conversations that we're having based on the science and the data and where we are as an organization, as a county, and as a state at this time. We understand that through this pandemic in the last 11 months, that the variables change within hours, within days. And so our conversations tonight are thoughtful and they are intentional to have conversation. This is some proposals that we'll talk about tonight, but again, nothing has changed from our March timeframe from last year when we made the decision that we needed to close for the safety and well-being of our staff, of our students, and of our entire community. So I just want to preface that tonight. I've been in this organization a really long time, and it's not a place that you work, it's a place that becomes your family. And this is about the safety and security of all, and that's what these conversations are about tonight in planning forward. Our team, our committees, are very invested in modeling for our students what we aspire for them to grow and see, and that is to be future focused, to work on continuous improvement, and to not negate that there are measures within a pandemic that are not in our control, nor do we plan to take them into our control. And our whole interest in this presentation tonight is to ensure that that science and that data and the medical experts still guide any decisions that would be final, that would be made. So with that, if I could please start with the presentation, and it always begins, and it's a really good thing that it does, is with the timelines. And I'm not going to go through these timelines, but I want the community to be very cognizant
We lost you, Debbie.
Debbie, we can't hear you right now. We'll wait a moment for her to get back online.
Sure, Carrie and I can talk through the next slides, and Concetta, if you want to support as well, while Debbie re-engages her internet connection. What Deputy Superintendent Fragomeni was speaking to is that, we always start these work sessions, board meetings, discussions around return to learn with our timeline to capture in an archival way of where the district has been, where the guidance has been, and the information that's been provided since we concluded the end of last school year and have journeyed throughout the return to school for this year. You can go ahead and kind of roll through these next couple slides with our, starting in the school year, we talked a lot about a phased-in approach, and that remains the same. Go ahead and move to the next timeline. And then, there was some state guidance that was added in November and December as well, in terms of what learning environment should look like based on age. And if you want to just move ahead to the next timeline slide as to where we are now. And we just began the next iteration of our phased-in approach. And you'll hear these dates again a lot tonight throughout the presentation. But we welcomed students within our special education programming, and then our elementary age students today in cohort A were back for their first day of hybrid learning.
These are actual pictures of students in classes today. So we're excited, and the kids were very excited, and under those masks, we know there were many, many smiles. So we're excited to get started with our elementary and special programs today, followed by middle school next week and high school the week after that.
And I want to add that the afternoons, just like for at the secondary level, when students are dismissed early and teachers work with students who were asynchronous in the morning and the afternoon, it's very similar in the afternoon for our program students at the secondary level. So in the afternoon, those teachers are working with students who maybe have medically fragile situations and are unable to attend school in person. So they spend their afternoons connecting with those students.
Thank you. If you want to move to the next slide. Here's just the summary from the county of what's put on the county's website. This was updated COVID information as of January 21st, 2021. As you can see where the current cases are % positive and what's happening at a county level. Go ahead and move forward. And the Oakland County Schools Weekly Report. And again, we'll be referring back to this kind of throughout based on some updated guidance we received. We began receiving the school weekly report from the county level in late August, and that has continued. The report itself has evolved in terms of what has been presented. And you'll notice the biggest change is no longer does it refer to a level or a phase that the county is in based on local health metrics. As we'll talk about later in the presentation with updated guidance, those local metrics are no longer included on the weekly report. So in terms of school guidance at a glance, we have received 3 main guidance documents from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and Oakland County Health Division throughout the summer and into the school year. The first main piece of guidance that we received from the state was the MDHHS Return to Learn Roadmap. We received that on June 30th, 2020, and we created a plan around the recommendations and areas of areas that were required, and that was presented to the community on July 27th. At the start of the school year, then we received that guidance document from MDHHS that included the level and the local health metrics, and that is commonly referred to as the matrix. We have referenced that throughout as part of our presenting, as part of our committee work, and as part of internal discussions we've had. And again, that has changed. The latest guidance document that we have received is the Guidelines for Operating Schools Safely. That was released January 8th. And as a result of that, we've updated our learning plan, and that is being presented tonight. Internally, As part of COVID response legislation, we've updated our internal preparedness and response plan based on the new guidelines. And then we always have the COVID-19 extended learning plan, which is just an overall structure of the types of learning environments that our students may participate in based on internal decisions and state decisions. It is not the approval of a specific learning environment that our students participate in. You want to go ahead and move forward?
Thank you, Mr. Heitch.
Hey, how are you?
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank goodness for a great team. The one thing I wanted to add, Corey, just in the notes that we had with the summary from the county and the governor's updates from today, that from November, the cases have been in a reduction of 72% and a 6.2 trending down line from November forward. The one component that we all are very cognizant of is the vaccine distribution as well. I know that they're expediting the vaccinations moving forward. Again, this will be a voluntary choice of our staff, but we certainly are encouraging and eager for our staff that are making those selections to get the vaccine to get it as soon as possible. So on this guidance at a glance, in terms of what Corey was just describing from June through January 8th, where the guidance significantly was adjusted in terms of what our needs were. A key point that I just want to mention in terms of the adjustments would be in the last box on the bottom to the right. From what we've learned and what we know. And this is very important. This answers a lot of questions to why we're bringing forward the information that we have tonight. This guidance is intended to update the My Return to Learn roadmap from June 30th of 2020. Over the last 9 months, epidemiologists and other medical experts have closely followed the data and determined schools can ensure a low risk of transmission by adopting strict mitigation measures. And most importantly, to mention here to the board and to the community is previous guidance based on state reopening phases or local case rate targets appears obsolete at this time. So the matrix has now become an obsolete variable in the Return to Learn plan. Again, for comparison, we have from January 20th of this year, the purpose of the MDHHS and Oakland County Health guidance at a glance. We are working diligently and closely with our school nurse, the county nurses, and at the state level. The key points that are integral to all decision-making for our children returning in a hybrid or returning to a full instruction model when the conditions would be safe would be to continue with mitigation and safety measures, responsibilities in the workplace, which includes our responsibility to do trainings, remote work procedures, self-reporting procedures, and exposure risk clarifications. Those are key points that we are committed to ensuring that the community and above all, our staff members have accurate information to feel safe. We will continue with the extended learning plan to provide educational goals for all of our students in our subgroups. Rochester Community Schools originally adopted this framework in opportunity labs when we began our COVID task force in April. And we continue to deliver instruction and are committed to a remote learning environment due to the pandemic. And that has been the trajectory that we have been on since we closed in November. One final piece under the comments, I want to reiterate that this plan currently does not replace the RCS COVID-19 preparedness and response plan. Again, it was developed in conjunction with our guidance from the health department, the CDC, the Oakland County Return to School Task Force, Governor Gretchen Whitmer's Return to School Advisory Council, our COVID-19 Task Force on Education, our district school nurse, and the community health partners. So with it, I'd like to take a pause. That's a lot of background information. We're going to be speaking about guidance changes and the trajectory of the virus and our planning moving forward. I just would like to take a pause if the board has any questions about our first subset on the history of the pandemic in Rochester. We'll do our very best to answer.
I think that was a good overview. I feel like we can go ahead and stop for questions maybe along the way.
And that's perfectly fine. Again, all of this will be put into our website for greater review and documentation. And again, it's a reference that we use with the medical experts. So I'd like to move into the next slide portion, return to in-person learning, and the Michigan guidelines for operating safe schools. The guidelines for this safety was dated on January 8, 2021, and it was intended to be the update from June 30th I just mentioned in the roadmap. The state of Michigan has set a goal that all school districts offer an in-person learning option for students as soon as possible and no later than March 1st. Schools are strongly encouraged to provide as much in-person learning that is feasible. Over the last 9 months, epidemiologists and other medical experts have closely been following the data and determined schools can ensure a low risk of transmission by adopting strict mitigation practices. And finally, prior guidance, as I've mentioned before, from the Michigan Department of Health and Oakland County Health Department guidance for in-person instruction, the matrix that we've been talking about through the fall, provided a letter grade for the risk level determinations. This now appears to be obsolete. And I would just like to mention that in talking with the health department, I asked specifically what level would we still be in. In November, we were in level E. In January, we're in level E. And it's important to say that because that is a question of why we are considering opportunities to start bringing our children in. That matrix is obsolete.
Debbie, I have a question about that matrix. Did you have an opportunity to ask why they decided that that was obsolete?
It's a very good question. They believe that with the study that they've been doing of schools and the additional mitigation risks of plexiglass, of the mask wearing, of the social distancing, that there's a correlation to a more minimum exposure following those safety protocols. And when they created that document, they didn't have the same data combined as they do now.
Mm-hmm. But this was making that obsolete was prior to any information we currently have regarding the variant that's floating around, I take it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The variant that started with 1 and is up to 15 tonight. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And I just want to reiterate briefly with that variant for anyone who's watching this, we are not by any means negating what that means or what that could mean. Again, in this pandemic, we know that being fluid and monitoring and following the data is going to be exceptionally important. The mitigation that's coming out against the variant requires some safety protocols and measures that we will be revisiting as we move forward through this.
Debbie, I was wondering, can you talk about what numbers or what we would be looking at to ever go to remote or to full person, how we would make those decisions?
Help me understand, Michelle. I understand the question, but I'm wondering what numbers you're looking for.
Well, just what matrices will we have one? What are we going to be measuring and looking at to determine when it's safe, when it's not safe to be in person or not in person?
Okay, thank you. I can speak to this and my team certainly can add in. We do talk about this very frequently. We have studied other districts that have matrix and numbers. What we believe and what epidemiologists that we're working directly with have stated is that each individual case that we're monitoring, every building that we're looking at may have different variables that will require lack of staffing to be able to staff the building that we may need to close. It is done more on a individual building. We have 23 of them, building level considerations. We're not looking at a specific matrix per se. We're going to be using the guidance, and we'll be looking at the number of cases and the impact. So for example, there could be schools that have teachers and students that are quarantined, and we may have more active cases in another location. So it's going to be a case by case, school by school opportunity that we'll have to make those difficult decisions. And it is our intent to try to avoid any full closure of the district, to keep some models of hybrid in place, unless the trajectory of the virus requires a district decision. And that would be more conversations between now and we would go to a full possibility of in-person, Michelle, that we would need to have further discussion.
So just for me to clarify what you're saying, that because of these studies that have shown that it's not transmitted as easily in schools, we're looking more at our school community and what's happening there than what's happening in like the greater Rochester or Michigan community.
Thank you, Michelle. That's better than I could have said it. Yes, absolutely. We do not want to put a blanket number out there. We need to be working with the variables that are impacting our school community.
Debbie, could there ever be a scenario where one building in particular had to close and another would not in our district? How would that be handled?
Very good question. That's what we're working on right now. This is going to be really helpful as we bring our staff voices in on our committees and our parents in on how that may look. We're going to be talking tonight about the guidelines that have adjusted for quarantine. But one thing that we will be talking about tonight, even if our colleagues have received a vaccination, if they are in a exposure mode to someone with COVID-19 or they begin having symptoms, they as well will be required to have a quarantine window until enough vaccine have been in the arms of our community and we begin to start seeing some documentation of herd immunity.
And just to add to that, what we've seen with other districts and what we heard from within our partnership of Oakland County Health is, some of the ideals that were included in the matrix in terms of, the categories that the levels put us in, the headers on those did deal directly with what is happening in your district. So that is always the consideration is the health department telling us that we have ongoing transmissions in a building or in a district, and then they would partner with us in terms of helping us guide the decision making. But what's gone is the concrete categories of the local metrics have to be in the county, have to be within this ballpark in order to have full density, or when they're here, then you go to half density, and when they're here, then you're all remote. That's the piece that's gone. But the idea that what the county is telling us through their investigations and what we're seeing are happening at each individual will still be there.
Any other questions? It's a lot of information. We have a lot to continue to study and learn and process. And again, that's our goal tonight for the work session, is to be thoughtfully considering these opportunities to proactively prepare for our students.
Can I just summarize, Debbie, and you can correct me if I'm wrong? Two things that were brought up, one by Michelle and one by Barb. There is no hard line anymore about whether we're in remote or in person, right? The governor has decided she's going to prioritize education. And we understand that transmission in schools is low compared to the rest of the community. and therefore the risk in the schools is lower than the rest of the community. So that I think what we'll see is the rest of the community has to shut down first before we shut down the schools again. I think that's prioritizing the schools. And then the other thing is, I think we're going to continue, if Corey said, I think Corey said we're going to continue to work with the Oakland County Health Department to figure out what happens when we do have outbreaks or when we do have to quarantine people. I mean, they tell us what to do anyway, right? Mm-hmm. There's nothing really that we need to, I mean, all of the guidance comes from them on the spot anyway. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, sir. And we also have our in-person extraordinarily talented Tanya Rudgmont and Susan Dominic, who are also working every day side by side with the Oakland County and are in meetings. We have superintendent meetings with the county and the state on a regular basis as well. So the information is coming in on different lanes, and we're continuously making sure that we're merging them to have the most accurate information.
Yes, of course. Excuse me, Tanya and Susan.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next slide, please. Safety protocols. We've identified some safety protocols, and even our buildings today that we're starting that opportunity to see our kids again, we're asking about some of the PPE plexiglass that has been distributed, and we are communicating out what has currently been ordered and is already on sites. Many of the identified safety protocols and the mitigation strategies have been established within our district. That's what we have been doing. That's what our teams have been doing. That's what our grounds and our facilities have been preparing for, is our students. We are all preparing for the safe return of our staff and our students. Personal protective PPE, such as face coverings, hygiene, proper hand washing, spacing, movement, and access. And we'll talk tonight where we have committees thoughtfully, strategically talking through the complexities to problem solve for the safe resolve in that area. Enhanced cleaning protocols, improved ventilation practices, and improved water management processes. I have spent time on the phone and in several meetings on ventilation, on water management systems. We have made provisions in our buildings with our facilities to ensure that drinking fountains have been closed down because the systems have been closed down. And we have also updated our water systems. So a great deal of work has been done while our students haven't been here, so that when they return, those protocols are in place and continue to be monitored as we move forward.
Can we go back to that slide, please?
Mm-hmm.
So the first bulleted item, the PPE, this evening, it was interesting, right before this meeting, I saw a news story about the suggestion that folks now double up on their masks and have a double layer, hopefully some sort of either an N95 or a surgical mask and then a cloth covering to give that added layer of protection, especially with this new variant that we just referenced earlier. Yes. So, and then also too, if it's available to you, a face shield. So, you know, these are all things that I couldn't necessarily see, you know, a K through 5 student necessarily wearing, but most certainly teachers and staff. And I'm hopeful that a lot of the federal or state dollars that we've gotten to help with these safety protocols. Can you speak to that, Debbie? Is some of that being utilized, and have you taken into account this recent development of doubling up masks and so forth?
And again, that information coming out about the masks are within the last 48 hours. And I would ask Matt McDaniel. Matt, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we've had some really thoughtful conversation about dollars coming into the district and opportunities that we would have to provide additional protection for our staff. Matt, are you available to speak to some of those pieces that we have? If you're on.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. Yeah, so Barb, to your question, we have already supplied face coverings, face shields to our teachers. You'll remember as part of the previous guidance when we asked our teachers to clean classrooms that we had to supply gloves, face shields. We supplied a stipend for masks so that teachers could buy whatever mask was appropriate for them, whether that was they felt they needed N95 masks, they wanted cloth masks, they wanted surgical masks. So, we made PPE available to our staff. We have plenty of face coverings still. It's not a requirement for cleaning anymore. So, if teachers need those and want to wear them all day, they're certainly available to them. I think it as well, when we look at masks, most people have many masks, right? I started with just, 3 Michigan masks, and now I have, 15, 20 different masks that I can wear, some with the RCS logo. I was wearing around one with numbers today because, budget and accounting is normally what I do. So, I think there's opportunities if staff feel the need to wear additional masks. We've offered resources to make that available. There are face shields available. We still have gloves, things like that can be used throughout. There's also plexiglass that we've distributed to buildings, plexiglass barriers. There's some that were specifically targeted for special education, but there's others throughout the building that can be used for our general education teachers, targeting specific situations that are hard to distance with students. They may not need it throughout the full day, but if I'm working one-on-one with a teacher, and certainly Debbie or Corey or Carrie could speak to that much better than I could, in certain instances, if I'm reading one-on-one with a student or doing some sort of assessment, I can talk to my building principal or the main office and get a plexiglass barrier for those certain times that I may be one-on-one with a student.
In terms of training, I just would like to add as well, and this is why it's so important that we're working with health experts, Barb, as well. Our health nurses, along with our internal team, is scheduling continuous trainings with our staff members with the latest in what is required for safety measures. And that's something we're going to continue to do to mitigate any of the risks. So as this information is coming out about possibly a different type of mask, we need to be as responsive as possible. We owe that to all of the stakeholders in our community. And we want people to be as safe as they possibly can.
Certainly. Thanks.
And next slide, please. Okay. Is this mine? I think this is still mine. I have a great team. We've been through this. I believe this is still mine. Thank you. Okay. So with that, this is the spacing, movement, and lunch. And this is where our staff voices and problem solving and the innovation of our colleagues, our committees are working very hard. The complexities are rich here. And we have every confidence that we will together be able to come to the other side of this. The first is from the guidance is spacing for instructional setting. When we're pursuing a 5-day-a-week in-person instruction, if 6 feet of seated distance in instructional areas is not feasible, then schools should consider a minimum seat distance of 3 feet in instructional areas. Our response at this time to that guidance would be that Rochester's exploring all of our opportunities to utilize spaces in a very creative manner. And that is something that we are working very diligent for. We have a board meeting on February 8th. We have a study session on February 22nd, where we're hoping to be able to bring forward the creative, innovative feedback from our staff, from our committees, from our parents, as we would move forward. Under movement guidance, the recommendation is to limit mixing between groups and classes. Our district response on January 25th this evening is a direction with the elementary classrooms. RCS elementary classrooms will function as a cohort. Secondary education utilizes a block schedule to limit that movement. And a reminder that as we begin the school opening, there will be a limitation to the number of guests that would have access to our school buildings to mitigate further risk to the stakeholders in the buildings. Lunch guidance. This one suggests that when students eat, that we provide 6 feet of distance to the extent that is feasible. Our response would be schools will add additional tables and continue to keep students in cohorts. All grade levels may utilize additional space and stagger lunch times. All eating areas will be thoroughly cleaned between groups and classes. And the details will be coming as we navigate through these questions in terms of how best to keep our students safe through the lunch program. Cleaning guidance. Frequent touch surfaces, including light switches, doors, benches, bathrooms, should be cleaned at least twice daily. Our response: the surfaces must be cleaned with either an EPA-approved disinfectant or diluted bleach solution. Frequently touched surfaces included the switches, the doors, the benches, the bathrooms will be cleaned twice daily. After every class period, media centers, computer labs, arts, and other hands-on classrooms and student desks will be wiped down.
And I can just step in real quick. And the cleaning of the surfaces really, if you compare the guidance document on June 30th in phase 4, where we were as a state at the time, into what was received a few weeks ago, that's a huge shift. At the time, what was required on June 30th and up until now was that a trained staff member would clean those surfaces every 4 hours, so not twice daily, but designated by time. And then also the person doing it had to be in a face covering with a shield and gloves. So that was such a complexity at the time. That was a major reason, in addition to limiting movement, that the block scheduling allowed for more passing time so those things could be done. So while cleaning of surfaces is still a high priority and a major mitigation strategy, there's more of an understanding of what truly needs to happen within a school setting compared to what we were required to do on June 30th.
Any questions about the guidance that we received so far?
What are the plans for elementary specials as far as, to try to limit movement between classes?
Sure. So initially, the 5-day plan based on the Return to Learn roadmap is that we, because of the surface cleaning requirements, specials took place in the classroom. And that's where they have, for the most part, within even our temporary hybrid models, is that the specials teacher, and we've mitigated through scheduling in terms of how many classes they go to in a day currently. They go to the classroom to have those. In October, a lot of things were happening outside when the weather dictated as well. There's some new, I don't know, flexibility is the correct word from this, but there's some new opportunities that we would have because one of the things that is very clear in the updated guidelines is to use spaces creatively. So if there are opportunities to find a different space within a school where kids could space more based on what they're doing, we need to look at that. So that's part of that committee work as well. Kristen, is getting specials teachers input, building administrators input of basically saying, okay, here's the updated parameters, here's the rules we have to play within, here's what we're looking to do contractually as well, and make those merge and have a couple recommendations because those are very important times for our kids in their day as well. And for that teaching staff, when we're talking about the well-being of the teaching staff, yes, we're trying to mitigate the virus as much as we can, but we also, our staff loves connecting with kids. So we need to provide an opportunity from all of our teachers to connect with kids in the most appropriate way.
Thank you.
Corey, are you going to speak then now to the quarantine? Or
This
is
is me now. I was just seeing if there are any other questions. If not, moving on to the next section. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. Continuing on with some guidance change in relation to quarantine duration. Back in December, MDHHS and the Oakland County Health Department updated some guidance for teachers or students who were quarantined if they did not have symptoms, which could be reduced from 14 days to 10. We intend to follow that with some notable exceptions that are listed below. It would not apply to Caring Steps Center or any classrooms where there couldn't be masking regularly done, or situations where there couldn't be masking regularly done, such as some special education classes, some athletics such as swimming, or other scenarios. And again, those quarantine guidelines apply to individuals that are identified as a close contact to someone that tested positive or someone that was exposed to COVID-19. You can go to the next one. So overall, state of Michigan also published in correlation with their updated guidance, a rationale behind it, which was some of the questioning received earlier, kind of the why. Some of the rationale provided was that state of Michigan's committed to supporting schools so we can operate safely. I think we all can speak to the benefit of attempting to get back in person as quickly and as safely as possible, the educational benefits and the social and emotional benefits that lead to for our students and our teachers. And I think over time, in the rationale as well, the discovery or the learning that risks can really be mitigated or reduced by implementing a lot of the protocols that we were already working toward in the fall, but have improved over time as well. And that schools can be safe learning and safe workplaces and safe learning environments. And most importantly, at the bottom, that we owe it to our children, teachers, administrators, and staff as a community, not just a school community, but a greater Rochester community, to all do our part. It's our collective responsibility to make this work and to work together so we can have a successful in-person end of the school year. And finally, sort of as a summary of the evolution of the guidance from the state and the county, some of the main changes, again, to reiterate, are the frequency of the disinfecting surfaces, which was a kind of a 4-hour requirement, or any change of students, which is transitioned to a 2 times per day requirement. The minimum seating distance, again, which was vaguely referred to or referenced as 6 feet, now is referenced to you should try for a minimum of 3 feet. The guidelines for close contact quarantines, which has been reduced from 14 to 10 days, provided you're symptom free and provided you can return to a setting in which mask wearing can be done with fidelity. And the fact that the state of Michigan is now guiding that prior matrix or hard number studying of when it's safe and when it isn't are now considered to be obsolete. So our overall commitment is to following the guidance of our public health experts and our experts at the state level, and also to continue to remain flexible to adapt as more changes inevitably come our way in that guidance. And it's kind of the end of this section. So if there are any questions about this section before I turn it over to Ms. Lawler. Great. Thank you. Carrie Lawler, I think you're up next.
I am. Thank you. So a few additional updates to share with everybody as we're moving forward here and getting ready for coming back in person. And you can just move to the next slide. So with much sadness, I think for a lot of people in our school community, the January 22nd order continues to temporarily pause our indoor contact sports. So for us, that includes basketball, cheer, hockey, and wrestling. And anything that requires close physical contact is not permitted at this time. And the order goes until February 21st. So we still have approximately 4 weeks before any indoor contact sports can begin. Originally, that was set to expire on February 1st, and I know our athletes had looked forward to that, and our parent community had looked forward to that. And but the governor's office did extend that based on their recommendation of safety. So we are doing everything that we can to keep kids as safe as possible and to keep them in school. 6 foot distance has to be maintained at all time during conditioning and practice. Those teams can get together and do conditioning and practice. Doesn't quite look the same if they're 6 feet apart and in a mask, but they are doing that and participating in that at this time, which can continue. And masks are required for everybody except for when you're swimming. And the swimming and diving is actually the only sport that can compete that we have right now. I'm sorry, the ski team is in competition as well. So because it's outdoors and very spaced. So, and swimming is obviously in the water. So screening questions are still taking place. The temperature checks continue. So students are, even if they're 6 feet apart in masks, they're following a strict protocol that was developed very early in the school year. And then on the next slide, we had already participated at least a little bit in antigen testing, which used to be called rapid antigen testing. And now they've taken away the word rapid and just call it antigen testing. But it is our MHSAA partnered with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services to do a pilot program, which we were able to participate in through our swim teams. So it was only used to wrap up the finals and the playoffs when they brought back the fall sports after the holidays to finish up and do their finals. And I think the final was when football ended this past weekend. So it offered athletes an opportunity to participate in the school testing program. So they are the last group that we had in that was still in competition was our girls swim team. We had about 17 students across the district who had qualified for the state meets and were still in competition. So most of them participated in the pilot, I think all but 2. And what that meant was that they were tested in the school 3 times a week. Our athletic directors were actually trained to test them, and it had to be on non-consecutive days. They tested 3 times a week. They wore their face masks when they could, except for when they were obviously swimming or diving. And those tests they could take on their own with the help of the athletic trainer. They would literally swab themselves, and then the trainer would read that for whether anybody was carrying any COVID virus. In all of the tests that we had only 1 student ever test positive. So in the 17 girls who were participating in that, as well as 3 coaches. So we did not have this ability before, but because of this pilot that Rochester took part in, the state is considering making those rapid tests, now called just antigen tests, available for staff in the school and have them as needed for the school. One caveat to those tests, I know when our students were using them, if you had symptoms, you were not supposed to use that test. So we would not be able to, ask somebody, hey, are you not feeling well? Why don't you take this test? The test really isn't for that. They would probably have to have a different one. So this would be sort of in a random testing mode, if you would. But it was an interesting pilot that kind of laid some groundwork for us to be able to move forward if we do decide to make optional, obviously, tests available within the school system. So that's kind of our athletics. And then I think Concetta Lewis is going to talk to us a little bit about building resources if there are no questions here. Concetta, are you with us?
I am. I can go to the next slide. Yep, there we go.
Can I ask a question real quick, Carrie? Sure. The antigen testing, is there an opportunity to use the antigen testing program to get indoor sports back? Is that an option?
I'm not sure. They were using it for indoor sports, but it was the swimming, which was allowed to continue. I don't know if they've looked at that option or not, or if that's something that's cost prohibitive. I don't know how that has progressed. So it might be something that the state is looking at for that.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
All right, if there are no more questions, good evening, everyone. So each of our buildings has a COVID resource binder. So if they have questions about what do I do when this happens? What do I do, if a student gets sick? What do I do if someone gets symptoms in the middle of the day? So there's a binder that details for every building administrator what the process is, what the procedure is, lets them know, where they should place a student, who should monitor the student, how that support is given. So all that information is in there. We also have 2 nurses that have been assigned to support us from Oakland schools. And the good thing is that support has evolved from when we first got it. And now they have really taken over more of the contact tracing and the investigation process within the cases, which frees up Susan and Tanya to work on some other things throughout the day, and not have to work throughout the day and all night as well. So having that support really has been a benefit to our team. So the Oakland County nurses do the reporting, and they make sure that all of the information, I believe it was Mike who talked about earlier, the county pretty much tells us this is what you need to do with each case. And so now those nurses are sharing that information and detailing those steps. And as information changes, then we have the latest information from the county because we have the nurses there with us. And then we'll continue to report the cases that we get in accordance with the guidelines that are set forth by the county. Sometimes that information may not necessarily appear in real time, or you may say, I thought there were more cases, or I didn't think there were that many cases, because of how the information is reported to us. And once it's confirmed, we have to wait until they tell us, now you can report it. And so it might seem like it doesn't line up day for day, but it is because of the reporting process. It's not that we are trying to not share information. We're sharing it in accordance with the guidelines that have been set forth by the county. Next slide. So there are anyone who needs to get a test, if you're having symptoms, no matter for adults and children, there is free testing available within the county. There is an appointment required for that testing, but you don't need a prescription from your physician. You would simply call the number or email the address that's there and set up your appointment. And they do that free testing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at different locations throughout the county. And this is the free testing. There are lots of other testing sites available and resources if you have that, but if you need free testing, that is available for everyone as well. Next slide. The vaccine, this is probably, we have buzzwords in education, right? So the vaccine is our buzzword for right now. Everybody wants to know where is the vaccine? When can I get it? It's like, is it the Xbox 5? I don't know which one it is, but whatever it is, it's the hot item right now, right? And so we've talked about this before. Phase 1A and our occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists, that was really for healthcare professionals and those in long-term care facilities. But some of our staff members who work really in close contact with students, and many of those students are students that cannot tolerate wearing a mask. And so they are in that top priority group to be able to have access to the vaccine. The next set includes 1B, includes any education, anybody who works in the field of education. So any of our employees in Rochester Community Schools, this includes our bus drivers, this includes our food service support, this includes our custodial team, any one of those individuals, if they support Rochester Community Schools in any way, they are able to make an appointment once those appointments become available. And I think that is probably what is the bigger challenge at this point, is making sure that as those vaccines come in, having staff who want them, making sure that they have access to them, whether it is through Oakland County, if they are a resident of Oakland County, or perhaps if they live in a different county, maybe they might have a double opportunity to access one of those appointments if they live in Macomb County or live in another adjoining county. And I believe that, oh, next slide, we'll talk about that one. In some counties, I will say this, and I don't think I've heard this for Oakland County yet. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I have heard that there are counties that have prioritized, even with educators, special educators. So those, like I mentioned earlier, who might be working with groups of students who are not able to tolerate wearing a mask, even within the educator priority area, they have prioritized those in a higher level of priority as well. And then, so if you are interested in receiving a vaccine and you want to make sure you have the most up-to-date information, there's a link here, sign up, and it works. I've been getting texts and notifications and alerts about the vaccine on my cell phone, so I'm a witness that it does work. So if you have not already signed up for that and you do want the vaccine, I encourage you to sign up for that. And I believe that's the end of this section. Questions? Go ahead, Mike.
So do you have any idea for our staff, how many have been able to get vaccinated yet?
I have asked that question, working with Doug Hill on compiling that information, and hope to have that in the next week or two to you. I know on Saturday, the Novi showcase did 3,000 vaccinations at that time. I know several Rochester educators and staff had the opportunity to attend there. So hopefully on February 8th at our board session, we'll be able to update you on that information that we've compiled. I know that there's many that are on the wait list. Certainly. There was 80,000 waiting for a spot a week ago. Wow. And as of last night, Dave Coulter mentioned on the news, there's 170,000 people waiting for the vaccine right now. So as soon as the vaccines are available, the county is and the hospital systems are preparing to give as many vaccines as able to.
That's great. Thank you, Debbie.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Corey if there are no more questions.
Thank you very much. So as we begin to kind of wrap up where we're at and share our potential next steps, we wanted to get into what's taking place with the new guidelines in order to scale up to full-time 5-day in-person learning and some tentative dates associated with that. So if you could go ahead and move to the next slide. As you know, the recommended timeline for scaling up with the hybrid began today. Next week, our middle school students will join us, and in 2 weeks, our high school students will return to in-person learning on February 8th. The big shift from what we were able to share a few weeks back is the tentative dates that we've set as a goal for five-day full-time in-person instruction. The first of those dates would be Monday, February 22nd with elementary and our special programs. That aligns beautifully with the end of the second trimester and would have us right on target to complete the last trimester with 5 full days of in-person learning for our youngest learners. And then all of secondary would return to a 5-day full-time in-person schedule on March 1st. So that is a little bit different than how we've handled the secondary with phasing in. 6 through 12 will attend on day 1 together on March 1st. So I am going to turn it over to Josh Wrinkle, who is one of our assistant principals at Rochester High School, and Dave Poncius, who's the principal at McGregor Elementary, to talk about the conversations that have been going on and will continue to go on as we scale up.
Thank you, Mr. Heitch. Josh Wrinkle, about 50 other community members, including parents, teachers, ancillary staff, paraprofessionals, secretary staff, have been working since May on getting our students and staff back to school in a 100% full day model. As we've been going through this process, we've been fortunate enough to put some processes in place to mitigate risk in a hybrid model. What we're currently doing is looking at some of the challenges that are going to be presented to us as we move towards a full day model. One of the biggest obstacles to overcome is social distancing when we're at full capacity with our students. Some of the things that we need to consider at each level is maintaining 3 feet between students inside the classroom. One challenge that has presented itself is each building has a unique footprint, and the room dimensions vary. So this provides a challenge that we're going to have to investigate and collaborate on and figure out how to overcome. Another challenge is providing strategies to teachers to permit group work and other student actions in the classroom while preserving 3 feet separation. At the elementary level, this would include small group learning, conferring, elementary morning meetings, etc. Right now, we're looking at ways to modify the cleaning procedures during the classroom transition times. We're working diligently to find ways to maintain 6 feet of separation when feasible between students in the lunchroom. And we're doing this while another challenge that is coming up at the elementary while students go to recess, come back, is maintaining the integrity of contact tracing, including student interactions during bus transportation, recess, off-campus lunch, high school courses at OSTC campuses, and transitions from school to home. Mr. Wrinkle, would you like to explain some of the other challenges that we're facing, sir?
Sure. Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the Board of Education and the district administration for allowing us to present this evening. I also want to give a big thank you to our in-person committee members. As Dave mentioned, over 50 RCS staff members and community members have come together to initiate some conversation about how we tackle these new challenges that are in front of us. I think we're all extremely excited about the idea of having kids back in our buildings, but there's undoubtedly challenges. As Dave and others have mentioned already, chiefly that 3 foot distancing in the classroom, 6 feet at the lunchroom. Those are A and B on our list of priorities. But as we began to analyze the new state guidelines and receive some feedback from our committee members, there were plenty of other action items that came to light. These things include modifying procedures for cleaning commonly used items. So things you might find in a science lab or an art room or a foods room. Those tools, utensils, objects need to be disinfected between, each set of use. And we were doing that before, but obviously with having a full class in the room at the same time, it presents an additional challenge. Modifying our middle and high school schedules to push back the start of lunch, or as some of our staff and students started to call it, brunch, because it was a little bit early in the day. But while we're still ensuring that we have smaller populations eating lunch at the time and mitigating interactions with students. If one schedule is adjusted, we certainly know that has reverberations throughout the district and other schedules. And so making sure that if we make a change at the secondary level, we know how that impacts our elementary colleagues for things such as shared staff and transportation. So that's a critically important effort. And it's one of the things we'll be focusing on very soon. And then finally, working to ensure our food services are prepared to meet the demands of having a full group of kids in the building at one time while still properly mitigating the risk to our students. So our committee's got a lot of work ahead of it. We're meeting again tomorrow to continue our discussions surrounding these action items with the focus, as I mentioned, specifically on tomorrow, the schedules for secondary and elementary education. I think I speak for all of the committee members when I say we know that we have some significant obstacles ahead of us. There's no question about that, but we are up to the task and we appreciate the opportunity to assist RCS in efficiently bringing our kids back to school. So Mr. Heisch, I thank you very much, but back to you.
Thank you. Before I touch briefly on teaching and learning aspects related to assessments and then just the process within a school, are there any questions about anything that was shared by Mr. Wrinkle or Mr. Poncius?
So Mr. Wrinkle brought up the spacing, the student spacing from 6 to 3 feet. And I know in the spring, we, the board, given an opportunity to go to Rochester High to see a classroom setup with what it would look like with that 6 feet of spacing that originally was supposed to be put in place. And, realistically, it's quite significantly reduced in terms of the number of students. Even with 3 feet, you're still going to have that issue, because on average, how many kids do you have in a middle school or high school classroom? Between like 30 to 35, maybe 36. So I guess my question is, I'd love to be able to physically see what that looks like. Once you've gotten to that point, maybe taking a sampling at some of the middle schools and the high schools to set it up, and it can be a video or what have you, but I really want to see what that's going to look like in order to even come remotely close to meeting that 3-foot distance. I think it's going to be a real challenge to try and meet the class size requirements that you need to get the kids back in, all the kids back in full time. And that's my concern with that.
Barb, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And I know that we are starting to set up classrooms like we did before when the board had an opportunity to walk through. But I think that brings us to the bigger question that the community has asked: why are you even waiting? Why aren't we just all coming back at the same time? This is a really good example of why we're not in a position to bring all of our children back when we have such complexity and so many opportunities and committee work that needs to be done to bring them back safely, along with watching the science and the data that continues to change. So we believe the hybrid model provides us that momentum to be moving forward, to be studying this, to be building these classrooms, to be looking at this space. We need our teacher voices. They're the ones that are in the classroom. We need everyone at the same time, all working toward this goal, because we all want to see our children back safely. We want our staff back safely. And it's an ambitious goal. We recognize that. But I believe, as Mr. Poncius and Mr. Wrinkle have pointed out, we have a lot of questions and a lot of work that we need to be working on to make those things safe, so that the community can count on their children coming to school and have confidence that we're going to provide that environment for their children.
Just to follow up on Barb's question, I know, like she said, in the spring, we had really, that outline, like, this is what 6 feet looks like. This is how many classrooms we would need. This is how many buses we would need, XYZ for full time. I think it would be good for us to review that. I think it would be good for us to review, what does that look like now at 3 feet? What is the capacity that we have? Do we have the capacity for all of our students in their classrooms at 3 feet? And then the other part of that question would be back to the food prep pieces of things. Are we still looking at keeping kids separate in their classrooms for lunch and all of that, and not gathering them in a cafeteria? One of your youngest learners is very curious about this.
With regards to classroom capacity, Mr. Poncius brought up a great point. And there won't necessarily be a set number because there are different footprints, there are different spaces within a building. One of the strategies within the guidelines, and one that we've already explored prior to that, is how do you creatively use your spaces then? If there is a room that is more of a challenge to space the minimum seated distance of 3 feet, is there a different space within the building that could happen? Do classrooms switch? Do you move furniture? Do you do this? So everything is truly on the table. The biggest difference and update is that there is a minimum seated distance, and we didn't have that in June 30th. And if you recall, it's almost silly to say out now with what we know about the virus and what the experts have told us, physical and social distancing was only strongly recommended in June. So it wasn't, there was no real seated distance requirement attached to it. We had created and mocked up what it would look like, just for our own understanding and own learning of what space would look like and what is our capacity. But there's opportunities in conjunction with, how many student desks can fit in a room, what other spaces are available in a building, is there something we can be doing with class sizes, staffing? All of that is on the table in looking at the guidance that we have. More specific to the lunchroom, that's going to require a lot of creativity in terms of, again, using additional space. We adopted a cafeteria model based off the Return to Learn roadmap. And that wasn't just for how food was going to be safely served to our kids. That also was in conjunction with what was required of surface cleaning at that time, and what we needed to do for our staff in terms of airing and getting that space available for them without the full cohort of kids at that time. So all of those things are big discussion points. A lot of creativity and innovation will always come with that, and that's why it's important to get voices in the room.
And just sorry, Barb. Just as a follow-up, can you remind us when the 3 feet distancing as a protocol, as an actual protocol, was given to us?
January 8th.
Okay. So, so just, as a reminder to us, as a community, January 8th was when we were given this. So when we talk about things like committees and just looking at things, it's not that we were waiting to do this. It was that we just got this mandate and protocol and now have to figure it out for how that's going to work in classrooms logistically, which is a huge logistic, just a very tangible, as Dana would say, puzzle to solve. That has to be solved in order to have the kids back. But we just received that January 8th and it's January 25th now. So, okay, thank you.
And you bringing up the lunch scenarios actually made me think of, at least for K through 5, when are we going to, because I know we had a reduction in para support. So is there, or has there been thought to, when that might start to ramp up so that you would be prepared for when that full-time face-to-face happens, that you have that additional support staff in place?
Obviously, hiring in any capacity is a challenge in this environment, particularly with schools. That's something that we're actively pursuing. Our buildings know and will know what they need and what they have, and they'll be able to communicate up to see if there is a hole, and we will work diligently to address that. Our buildings are very creative. They're very committed. They're very creative in terms of, here's the folks I have available. Here's the space I have. Here's what needs to be done. All hands on deck. We'll figure it out. And part of it too is also a chicken and egg thing. Part of the reduction in staff that we've seen from support personnel is because kids are not in session 5 days a week. So, the thinking could also be is that staffing, while always challenging, may not be as huge of a hurdle to overcome once our students within Rochester get back 5 days a week. We may have more availability for people to commit to the ways they were supporting us prior. Okay, and I believe I am kicking it over back to Mrs. Lawler. Oh no, excuse me, we're back. We were still on the assessments. I apologize. So again, just wanted to touch on this. This is information that we've actually shared at the previous two board meetings, the one in December leading into January, and then a reminder in January that we're in our elementary assessment window. Our assessment practices and philosophies of assessment have not changed and have not altered in what we believe around assessment, how to utilize assessment to identify student needs. So that has not changed. And that's the key point that I wanted to share with the board and the community tonight. Our processes for, bringing building leadership teams together to address any any gaps in learning at the individual level, or any grade level pieces that they may see based on formative assessments or benchmark assessments like the iReady has not changed. So that continues. Those team meetings, what we call them, have been ongoing. They're led by our building administrators, our learning consultants at the building level, and other personnel within the building. So those meetings have taken place. As far as where we're at with iReady benchmark, in our January window, we're about 70% complete in both the reading diagnostic and the math diagnostic. So we should have an opportunity within the next 10 to 15 days to see what our growth data looks like from fall to winter of this year. The fall data that we received at our initial benchmark at K5, because we had taken that before, that was compared to last school year. So we'll begin to see some diagnostic growth measures of what has taken place. Again, our buildings are looking at that all of the time and are addressing any student need that comes up. So now I will officially.
Sorry, I would just add to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I am actually handing it over to you, Mrs. Lawler. So
You are handing it to me. You are. I'm taking the next slide. I just want to say on assessments too, we've had the question, how are you going to assess students and assess their learning loss and catch them up? And that is so much a part of what we do all the time in education. It's formative assessment. Every teacher's doing that before they start every unit, every lesson. They're doing formative assessment, and they are, making sure that the everybody is where they need to be, or at least has the prerequisite knowledge to move forward. So I think that is something that, we're really proud that our teachers are. We have very many teams that are participating in the FAME, which is formative assessment, measurement, and for educators. And that is like all they talk about is how do you do formative assessment, and how does that affect your learning, and how does that affect your teaching? So I'm proud to say that I think we have a pretty good handle on that, and it's not something that we should be worried about. In the next slide, I wanted to just address another thing. Are we on? Yeah, scholarly distinctions. So my very first year here in Rochester, in this office, I had the opportunity to present to the board, like literally 2 weeks into this job, about the new system that we were going to be using for the class of 2014 to recognize scholars of distinction. Prior to that time, Rochester had valedictorians and salutatorians, and when you just base everything on a GPA, sometimes that would, a committee of people before my time felt like that would encourage students to take easier classes because they could get higher grades. And so that was something they were trying to address when they set out to develop an entirely different way to honor graduating seniors for scholarly academic achievement. So they came up with one that no one else has ever used, that I have ever seen. And I was just super excited about it. I still am, because it takes into account 3 criteria, one being the GPA that was always used, which is a grade point average. And then another being how many AP classes a student would take. And so they decided that 4 or more AP classes would be the top category, and you had to have at least 2 AP classes to even get any of the criteria. And then the third criteria was the SAT. Well, at the time, it was actually the ACT score, because the whole state was taking the ACT test. Eventually, that moved into the SAT for the whole state. So the criteria kind of morphed into either the SAT or ACT score. And so that was the 3 criteria: GPA, ACT, and the number of AP courses. So this year, we looked at what had happened, and we were contacted by quite a few parents who said they couldn't take the SAT test in the spring. They were just canceled. The SAT test, for those who are not aware, is still a paper pencil test. It is not an online test. It's never been put online. So students would have to gather in a room, generally a large room, to take the test. So back in the spring, in April, all of those tests were canceled, and they were through most of the summer. They started having them in various places, but like Oakland University or other institutions, and then they would schedule them, but fill up very quickly because they could only have a very small capacity based on keeping kids 6 feet apart, or they would cancel them altogether because the COVID numbers had gotten too high. We offered the SAT when the state asked us to offer it as a makeup in October to make up for canceling it in April. About 77% of our students did take advantage of that. The state did not allow us to require it, only to recommend it. So not all students took that, and some students were actually quarantined during that time that we offered it in October. And so some students were not able to take it at that time. So the grading committee came back together and took a look at what was happening this year and what's unique to this class, and decided that that score component could be eliminated. Talked a long time about should we add something different, and decided that this actual opportunity was rolled out 4 years before the first award was given, so that students would have their entire high school career to work toward that. And it wasn't fair to add something new at the last minute, right before they're graduating. So they felt that it was okay to take something away, but not to add something different. So for this year, the class of 2021, that SAT score component has been eliminated, and the GPA and the number of AP courses is going to determine our Scholars of Distinction categories. We don't know yet. We're working on it. It ends at the end of the semester, the GPA. So I just talked today with Mr. Malofsky down in the technology department, and they're still working on rewriting the formula and pulling this all out of Synergy. So we don't know the new numbers. We don't anticipate a huge shift in the numbers of students being honored. What I have to say, though, is the number of students being honored, I have to say I'm blown away. And coming from, I was in 2 other districts before coming to this district. And when I looked at the criteria of the highest, the scholar of highest distinction, the 3.9 GPA, the score on the SAT or ACT, and 4 AP classes, I was thinking, we might have 5 students who achieve that recognition, because that's a pretty high bar. And I would say probably most of us in this meeting tonight probably wouldn't have hit that in high school, but the students have risen to it. We put it on paper and we challenged them, and our students have risen to that. They take AP classes at record numbers. They are achieving the GPA. They care about their GPA, and they are working hard and taking multiple stabs sometimes at the SAT to try to get that score up. So it's a system that's unique to Rochester. If you go outside of Rochester, no one knows what a Scholar of Distinction is, but I think it has been extremely powerful. I am very impressed with the number of students who are able to achieve it. And I get a little bit dismayed to hear people say, well, too many people are getting it, it's not special. I have to say that it is so difficult to achieve that we have to just be proud as a district and proud of all the kids who achieve that. So I'm hoping that parents will see it that way and not think that we're trying to make it easy on the class of 2021, because I'm here to tell you there has been nothing easy for the class of 2021. So just wanted to talk to that a little bit tonight.
Carrie, I appreciate that explanation very much. I wanted to add that I remember within the past 2 or 3 years, maybe the past 2 years, talking with, we talked about it either in a meeting or in a work session. And I remember one of the high school principals said, because I think we were talking about, there's so many of our students are getting these high distinctions, is something we have to look at changing. And I remember one of the principals said, it doesn't matter if you change it. If you make it harder, our students are high achievers, and they will figure out a way to make that happen. So it's not anything about the criteria being too easy. Again, what you said about looking at other districts is so true, because we have all looked at that in the past. It's about our students being high achieving students.
Yes. And we do walk that fine line because we do have some students who kind of get in over their heads by trying to take so many AP classes at a time. And so, we're very aware of that as well. So, but I have to say that this is a program that has been inspiring to a lot of students, and I think has really caused some very, very high achievement. Any other questions about that change this year? Well, I think we might be on the last slide coming up next here.
I think so. On additional information, I want to speak to what the glowing question is for today with our weather. And I wanted to share our plan for inclement weather events are yet to be problem solved and determined. I have been on a call with the county and the state meteorologist who have given us some direction that this evening's snow event is not anticipated to be what they had projected earlier this weekend. So we are planning for school tomorrow. In the event that the weather conditions do change, working with our staffs, and while our staff are virtual and are in a remote setting, the school would proceed if the weather conditions would require a cancellation of a department or a level of students that might require busing if our roads are not safe. So in the event of inclement weather, if we know the evening before, we certainly would put that out to our community to start making arrangements. Moving forward, again, our virtual students and our remote students can anticipate that school would be scheduled as usual. And our students who are in the hybrid, if there's any updates, we would inform families as early as possible. At this time this evening, we are not anticipating the weather to be coming in. It will be messy in the morning, I understand, but it will be coming in with high enough temperatures that we don't anticipate tomorrow being a problem with the weather. In terms of other questions that have come in about scheduled breaks in the calendar, at this time, we are not projecting any changes to schedule breaks, spring break, Memorial Day, those types of things we are keeping in place the way the calendar is established so families can plan accordingly. And informational item that is coming that those of you who are using our website right now for accurate information, the RCS website is going to go live February 1st. It has been postponed on several occasions, and we believe that this important communication tool, which will be much more mobile friendly, secure and quick to load, including the American Disabilities Act, to be ADA compliant and visually engaging. It will remain the same address, but February 1st is our transition date. So I wanted to make sure that our community is aware of those changes as they look for access or updates on events in Rochester. And next slide. A summary of the recommended timeline, again, beginning today, hybrid in-person learning for elementary and special programming. February 1st, hybrid in-person learning for middle school. February 8th, hybrid in-person learning for high school is projected. Our proposal for a tentative timeline being February 22nd for a full-time in-person learning for elementary and special programs, March 1st for full-time in-person learning for grades 6 through 12. Again, that is dependent on the conditions, the health conditions moving forward. We're fortunate to have a board meeting on February 8th, and we have a study session on February 22nd. So we'll have the most current information moving forward. And I want to respectfully share that as we receive communications from stakeholders, community members, staff members, I want it to be very clear that there's 3 takeaways that I've heard from the community today. And the first one is from staff members that they love their students. We all want to be back in school together. It's what our wish is. It's why we do what we do. We love our students. We want to be with them. We want to make sure that health and safety continue to be paramount. We are in a pandemic. We're moving to a new direction with the opportunity for vaccines. We know that going back to normal is going to be a new normal, and it's not going to be here immediately. But we felt that it was very important to bring into this study session tonight some opportunities to see where our committees are working, what we're thinking about, to take input certainly from the community. And there's by no means any opportunity in this to put more alarm out there for those that are moving forward and looking for direction. It's just our commitment that we're moving in a positive direction for our students. So with that, thank you for letting us go through this process. As you can see, it's a work in progress. And as you saw from the beginning of this presentation through our conversations now, we have leaders, teacher leaders, administrators, community members, a strong PTA partnership, and a commitment of our Board of Education to move forward in a safe and healthy manner. So thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate the work that went into this presentation. Thanks to the entire team. I wondered, Debbie, a question for you. So you and I have talked about this in the past couple of weeks. I think there's a sentiment in the community that why a phase-in? So not even talking about the phase-in from hybrid to in-person, because I think the understanding is that the hybrid has always meant to be a phase-in. It's never meant to be permanent. So elementary went back today. Why a 3-week phase-in for all 3 levels?
And thank you. And we hope that we've represented tonight to clarify what complexities and what challenges and the ever-changing climate of the virus and the new variant are in place. The emotional, social wellness of our entire student population continues based on even those who do not believe that we believe that's true. It is our core mission. And we know from talking to our students and talking to families, for children to be entering back into a school environment after such a significant amount of time deserves the care and the thoughtfulness for children to feel safe and move back into an environment that we can secure moving forward and scale up versus just throwing everyone back into a system and not scaling up to ensure everybody's safety, well-being, and their wellness.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation very much. I think it's really important, and that we can't say that enough, is that we are putting the mental health and wellness of our students, and this transition from being at home learning to in-person learning is not easy on a lot of our students. So I appreciate that. Other questions from board members? Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered, as we move to the 5-day-a-week face-to-face and we no longer have asynchronous or remote learning, what is the game plan for any student who does have to quarantine? How will they continue to learn?
Curriculum team, do you want to add in the differences? I think they're pretty similar to what we had anticipated beforehand.
I can say, Debbie, the remote committee headed up by Josh and Dave, that's one of the things that they're tackling, is how are we going to deliver that? And we're still looking, and I think Cindy and I had some conversation today more about the Nearpod. That might be a good tool for teachers to use to have something that is, kind of recording their class or something a student can access from home, like Google Classroom, but a little bit more interactive. And so we're looking at those things and looking to this committee to work on that piece of it. I think the same is true at elementary. Corey, am I right on that?
It is, and we would probably continue to approach it in the way that we're approaching it now, in identifying staff member, depending on caseloads, being a liaison and working with and helping organize some potential synchronous connections. Again, I would throw it back, and this isn't a plan that you can put on paper, because people's creativity comes out when it's needed. In what our buildings would be working together to make sure that the student's still connected to the classroom and feels connected to the classroom, while simultaneously working with that individual family. We had some cases in October that obviously required quarantine at the elementary level. And there was a difference in what the family felt was best at that time in terms of what we were offering. And they worked with the classroom teacher and the building administrator to come up with what worked well for them. Kinsetta, is there anything that you would speak to on this that is specific to our families with IEPs?
So we've been having similar conversations with our TCs for ASD, CI specifically. We also have been working with many of at the elementary level, students continue to connect with their providers remotely in those settings. And sometimes from a speech perspective, they can continue to do that and provide that service really without missing a beat. And it's that same building staff that they're able to connect with, so.
I've got a question. Scott Muska here.
Yes, sir.
How you doing? Good job tonight, by the way. A lot of stuff. Okay, so the question is, there's a lot of things that are inside our control, a lot of things outside of our control with this kind of thing, especially with the new variant and all of that. But when it comes to the items inside of our control, like our processes, our planning, things that we're doing with our people, those kinds of items, what might be the one thing that you feel the most optimistic about that makes sense for moving forward properly and getting to where we all want to get to? And then what's the one thing that is in our control where we're like, that one we got to keep a close eye on? That's going to be a complex problem. Like, what's the thing that we really got our eye on when it comes to those two items that are in our control, not the stuff that's not?
I love that. I'm going to write that down and I'm going to use that with my colleagues, and they know I will tomorrow. I love that. Thank you, Scott. I will just speak, and my colleagues on this call can certainly do the same. The optimism is that we are part of an organization that shares love and compassion for our students. And we share a vision that we want to have our children back. We want to do the right things for kids. We want to live into our beliefs in action and make a profound impact on the lives of our kids in spite of the pandemic. And the respectful conversations amongst the angst and the worry outweighs any challenge that we have. We have the right people doing the right work for the right reason, and that's going to pay dividends to our kids. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
I'd say from a guidance standpoint, what we've received from the MDHHS and the Oakland County Health Department, some clarity of how that matrix fits. And it is crystal clear when you use a word like obsolete, that's pretty crystal clear, because we have been living, and it's still very much unknown. I don't want to make it sound like the answers are there and we could respond, but when we have a document that allowed us to get our kids back in school at a lower density, and we got to the highest risk level, which meant that according to the matrix that we could not safely mitigate and have kids in school, 2 weeks later to hear from that same department, it's safe to have kids in school, made everything clear as mud. And then and the matrix was still being used. So there wasn't a document we could just ignore at that time. So clarity with how that fits within the updated guidance, and then just other clarity around what the parameters are and what we know now. There's a difference in the type of information that the medical community has shared with us as it relates specifically to schools that was not there. And it fits within the mitigation strategies that we have in place regardless of density with students in school.
I would add it too. Scott, you asked what we nailed or what we know we've got underway. I would add that Dr. Sheiner had a vision years ago, and we've been on this journey through social emotional learning and becoming a trauma-informed district. Our kids have been through trauma. Our teachers have been through trauma. But before all of this trauma of the pandemic, we were already training staff. What does this look like? How does it manifest? How can you deal with it? How can you help a child be resilient? So we have that under our belts. Our teachers already knew that even before any of this happened. And we didn't know that we'd be able to use that so heavily, so hard, so fast. But, I'm excited about that piece of it, that we have had a lot of training on, diversity and inclusion and on trauma information. And I think our staff is pretty well ready to go.
Anyone else on our team with any positive pearls?
Go ahead, Barb.
I love that question that you asked, Scott, because it's optimistic. But as Corey had said, this virus makes everything clear as mud. And I think we still have to be honest about the big elephant in the room, which is this virus, and that will determine whether or not this timeline is for the hybrid or eventually full-time in-person is implemented based on this calendar that we have created. Because if anything this past year has shown is that all the best laid plans sometimes don't happen when there's a pandemic going on. But I love that this presentation has shown that there's still that same thoughtfulness, that you are making opening our schools the top priority, and you're doing it in a very thoughtful manner, and that isn't changing based on what this pandemic is handing us. We're still going to be meeting the safety protocols for everyone in our district, students, teachers, and staff. But we also have to keep in mind too, and I think this tends to be the big elephant in our community, is that, as a district, we can only control what happens within our school buildings. That is the extent of our control, right? And so we really have to rely on our students' families and hope that they choose to take this pandemic seriously, because the behavior of the community that surrounds our schools will really play a critical role in the success of this hybrid phase-in, and then eventually, hopefully, a full-time face-to-face back to class for our students. So, I think we need to be really clear with our community members and our parents and saying that even with all these protocols in place and the procedures in place and, those things being met, we won't know for certain if they will mitigate, the future necessity of, having to switch back to remote learning for students. But, the availability of vaccines certainly gives us hope, which we should all feel hopeful about that. But we cannot, as a community, forget about, the necessity of mask wearing and social distancing and hand washing and avoiding large indoor gatherings outside of our school's community. So that is just something that I just felt like I needed to say, because we can be as thoughtful as we have to be and have procedures and mitigation things in place within the parameters of our school district. But the success of this rollout is going to be contingent on the community that surrounds us as well. And I think, Mike alluded to that early on too, that, switching the model and making our school environments the priority, that really is contingent on whether or not our surrounding community sees the value in that and will stick with those, mitigation protocols to make sure that it's a success. But I just want to thank everybody for this presentation. Really, it was great.
Thank you for that input. Scott, back to your question about challenges. Can you rephrase that for us again?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And thanks for coming back to it. And the thing that I was curious about was again, of all the things that are in our control, and certainly there's a lot that is not, you know, the variant and all of that, but the things that are inside of our control, the process is the things we must do. What are the things that are sort of the most concerning, or maybe the biggest elephants in the room that we got to tackle? Stuff that poses the biggest challenges right now to get it done. Even though we know we can do it and it's in our control, it's going to be tough. What's that thing that we're always talking about?
I need my colleagues to help me wave in. As you saw, the complexities, Mike Zabit, when you did the speech on complexities, we thought, wow, that would be really difficult if we had that kind of complexity. You laid the lane for us. Colleagues, any thoughts on what complexity is the biggest elephant right now in our system?
Well, from the operations side, it's getting enough people, right? So in every area, we are recruiting, and have been recruiting for a long time. It's getting the candidates for the jobs that are open. Right now, we are recruiting bus drivers, custodians, groundskeepers, food service workers. So on the operations side, it is, you know, getting the right number of staff to support the system.
And I would say that adds to the complexity and the logistics. You know, we have a 3-tier bus run. So we can't just say, oh, we think the high school should have this time slot and do this. It has to work with the bus runs for the middle schools and the elementary. And so that goes along with what Dana was saying. You know, we need all the bus drivers available. We need to make it work. And so I just think that's our biggest hurdle, is the logistics of how do we have lunch? You know, how do we have enough people to even clean the lunchroom in between all these lunches? And are we doing 4 lunches a day or 3 lunches a day? How do they fit? So just those kinds of logistics, I think.
I think too, it is the moving target of COVID. So we get to a place where we think, yep, we have it figured out. And then we hear there's a press conference today from the state, you know, and it's like, oh, we're nervous. Is that going to change our plan for today? Right. So it's the ever moving target of COVID. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges, because pretty much I think this team, I'm a new member here, but no matter what comes our way, we find a way through. And it's just making sure that if we know what the target is, then we can hit it. But sometimes it keeps changing. And so then we got to keep going.
Thanks, everybody.
Mike, go ahead.
I want to address this to Dave and Josh. I should have probably brought this up when you guys were talking. But so you're meeting with the committee tomorrow, and I want to make sure you guys, you know, understand that the board really is very thankful to that committee for the work that they're doing. You know, people tend to think that a committee of 50 is a very large committee, but to think of the planning that you have to do and the uniqueness of each building, right? You have to cater the solutions for each of the buildings. We have 23 buildings. So really, you don't have that many people, right? That basically breaks down to 2 people a building. And I mean, in my opinion, that's not enough. So I'm really glad that you have what you have, right? We need to get, you know, these people together so that they're creating the solutions for their own buildings, and that there's buy-in from the teachers and the administrators and the parents as we go through this planning stage. So thanks, guys, for taking care of that stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add one more complexity, if I may?
Yes.
Just thinking from the special ed lens, I was a general lens, but now from the special ed lens, the team has had to make a lot of adjustments starting the year, just the challenge from remote to in-person, but then there are contingency learning plans that have to be updated at every phase, right? Because how we support a student in hybrid might be different from remote. So each phase of our learning process IEP teams must come together and update contingency learning plans. Then we add to that new recommendations from the state for reviewing for recovery services within a particular timeline. And even with that, the staff, the special ed teams have been great. And so I think maybe I'm taking this moment to just publicly thank them for moving through all of those changes as they come about and continuing to serve our students to the best of their ability. Every parent who's reached out to me with a concern, even though they have concerns about things, they always end that conversation with, I love the team that is supporting my child. And so even with that, they've been able to continue to support our students in the best way possible and not allow all the things that they've had to go through have an impact on how they support our students. So that's it. I'm done now.
If I might, just for a moment, Mike made me think of something when he was talking about the committee and normalcy in a committee, and there's anything but because of this whole thing is so nonlinear, as everybody else has alluded to. It made me think, and many of you will remember this. I think it was 2014. Somebody might recognize that. There was a committee put together for what was called the Technology and Infrastructure 2020. And basically what the work of that committee was basically kind of paint a picture of what it might look like if we could ever get a bond. What are the priorities? And we took it from there. Well, what I just showed you right there was in essence a playbook. There is not a playbook for this. It doesn't exist. And the biggest part of the reason is because of the nature of the beast. So much has changed. Josh and Dave said several times in their portion of the presentation that this is ongoing. And that's the thing. It is. The whole thing is ongoing. I love that that we are moving forward, and I love that Debbie, that you guys are referring to it as learning forward and so forth. And of course, as this organization has every step of the way, we're going to continue to put an absolute top priority on the health of all of our constituents. Personally, I have 3 sons in the district. Many of you know that already. One of them has struggled mightily through all this, and I mean mightily. To the point of failing classes, which had never been done before. So on a personal level, yes, I'm very, very excited at the prospect and the possibility that this is going to happen. We all understand that, taking the personal part out of it. We all understand that this is extremely complex and will continue to be complex. There is a light at the end of the tunnel that is just maybe barely starting to come into view a little bit, and that probably is the most exciting part. So we do have tremendous opportunity. I mean, the old saying, right? In adversity lies opportunity, and we have seized opportunity through the adversity, and we will continue to do so. And I applaud all of you for taking on that monumental task. Thanks for doing that.
Kevin, I can't believe you have that binder and that you could pull it out that quickly. Impressive. Thanks for that. Thanks for saying what you said, Kevin. I appreciate you sharing your personal story. I wanted to ask a question as a follow-up to what Dana had mentioned about staffing. So in addition to custodians and bus drivers and trying to fill positions, I want to talk specifically about our teaching staff. So this won't be a secret. By the time of our next meeting, I think we've gotten 10 or 12 emails today from members of our teaching staff who are concerned. And, I understand all of their concerns. What I wanted to know was, in the fall, when we were planning to return to a hybrid situation, I know that our teaching staff was given options for example, for taking extended leaves or other situations. Now that our situation has changed with returning full-time 5 days a week rather than the hybrid, how are teachers being presented with other options, or how are we going to work with them if they are feeling concerned? Maybe the concern goes outside of the hybrid, but more to the full-time. How are we working with them, and what will we do to accommodate them?
So we have been meeting with any staff, teachers, paraeducators, secretaries, who have concerns about returning to work, either because of their own health condition or that of a family member, or just feeling uneasy and uncomfortable about returning to work. The same leaves are not available. The FFCRA leave is not available still. However, we are working with staff to make sure that we can accommodate their concerns, accommodate their requests. And the HR department had an open meeting, office hours last week, and met with several staff, not only just to hear their concerns about safely returning to work, but also about leave requests and concerns. And we continue to do that on a regular basis. So we are trying to work with everyone to make sure that we can accommodate and deal with their concerns and still maintain the staffing levels that we need. Again, that's one of the complexities. In addition to the bus drivers and food service and all of that, we still need to have teachers and staff and support staff and secretaries available as well. So we're working on that, as well as working to increase our substitute pool so that we have the ability to offer opportunities to staff that may need to be out, whether it's for a vaccination appointment that occurs during working hours, or whether it's because of an adverse reaction to the vaccine, or any number of things that could occur. So we are working diligently to try to increase our sub pools. We've added building subs, teaching subs for all of our buildings, and we're looking to double that as we can, to make sure that we have additional support, and also to provide additional support to those who might, those students who might be out on quarantine as well. So just trying to have all hands on deck. But we are working with everyone on an individual basis. Everyone's story, everyone's situation is different, but we're working with all of them to make sure that we can try to accommodate in the best way possible.
And I appreciate that, because everyone's story and situation is different. And in an organization this size, it is hard to make that those discussions personal. And I know that your team has. When you say building subs, does that, I'm just making an assumption, but to clarify, does that mean maybe like a couple of individuals who are always on call for a certain building? Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And we have had those in place throughout this last remote, the remote learnings phase. And that has been very helpful. And we're continuing to try to beef that up and to continue that process. We have found that the buildings have found that to be very helpful, to just pop in or help or provide additional support when needed. So we hope to continue to offer that, as well as increase the levels.
And not to keep picking on this topic, but I imagine that that also would help with a situation where rather than a sub pool where a sub can choose from different districts, for example, to work on in any given day if a sub is needed. So these are maybe subs that we can count on to be available for RCS, I guess, if needed. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
I appreciate knowing that.
I'm sorry. Also, you will notice, and you maybe have noticed in the last couple of meetings, we have also been replacing staff, where in the fall we didn't necessarily replace staff, but we have replaced staff in that we restaffed at the secondary level or rescheduled all the students and did another staffing as we had done in the fall. And so we are also, rather than hiring long-term substitutes in many of those positions, especially the difficult to fill positions, we're filling those with full-time regular staff as opposed to substitutes. So that is another thing that we're doing to try to make sure that we're using substitutes as opposed to continuing teachers, to the extent we're able to do that.
I appreciate those details. Thanks. Any other questions or comments from board members?
I just have one, and probably not a easy one. We've been on the defensive so much of this past year. And now looking forward and as much as we know that it's clear as mud and we will continue to have to navigate and things are going to continue to change all the time. One thing that we do know for sure is that we will be dealing with this virus for a while, right? And we will be dealing with some level of complexity with the virus and whatever it looks like come next fall. Where are we in, I know, like I said, we're still really on the defensive here with just getting our kids back into school now. But, are we looking to the fall? Are we starting to make preparations for if this, then this, and what that could look like and how that will look so that maybe we do get on the offensive and have some times where we have, now that we've got some time under our belts with virtual and hybrid and remote and all of that, it could just be a yes or no answer now, but I think in the near future, it would be nice to hear and just, kind of challenge us to make sure that we're sharing that with each other and the community. Here's what we foresee this looking like as we start to get on the offensive.
Thank you, Andrea. I can assure you forward thinking and planning and recovery are all part of these conversations. It kind of goes back to the beginning with our timeline. That's why we're documenting where we've been, where we are, what's going well, what isn't going well. There's legislation, there's conversations coming to us in terms of recovery dollars. Oakland Schools is offering, and there'll be a lot of information coming forward in the weeks forward as well, to summer opportunities for instruction, for tutoring, as we're looking at our transitional kindergarten in the fall and getting some of those pieces out. That momentum and that trajectory are right aligned with everything we're dealing with the mud. And the reason being is we have an obligation to our community and to our students, and for those families to have confidence that we are going to overcome, we're going to persevere, and we will recover, and we will do whatever it takes to recover from this pandemic. So all that planning will continue to be so. That's where our COVID task force, that's where the stakeholders' voices in our community will help to guide that, but it's not a thought that we need to get on the agenda. That's my initial thought to the daily work that we're doing.
Thanks.
Are there any changes imminent to the virtual campus as far as, like, I know we're talking a lot about the return to in-person schools and the 5-day a week. Is anything changing with our virtual campus starting in late February, early March?
I do not believe so at this time. We are, though, in fact, the virtual campus did our PTA council last Thursday evening, and a year ago, it wasn't even a thought about the virtual campus. They're building momentum. They're focusing in on innovation. They're focusing in on building partnerships. We're looking at opportunities of how we move forward because that is a program we committed to with a long-standing future vision. So for the short term, I don't believe, and if I'm wrong, I know that that team will bring me up to speed, but I believe right now, as we're moving through, their priorities are innovation, building partnerships, building programs and systems, and possibly opportunities for us to be able to expand as our district recovers from this pandemic, so they can continue to move forward as a forum for instruction.
That's great, thanks. Any other board member questions or comments before we move to citizens present at the meeting will be our next item on the agenda.
Along the same lines of your question for the virtual campus, how are we going to continue to address families that still don't feel comfortable with this, the phase-in, the hybrid model that we're proposing into a full-time face-to-face? Can you speak a little bit to that, Debbie?
It's a very real question and a very thoughtful decision that's going to need to be made. And we're working through that in our committee. Again, the trajectory of the variant has caused people who are very excited about coming back to pausing once again. So my initial thought is the virtual campus is one opportunity for instruction, but we're going to need to be very innovative and thoughtful to how best we're going to meet the needs of students whose families are not ready for them to be back in person. I personally don't know what that's going to be. If my colleagues have any better ideas, I'd love them. But I know it's something that is on our list that we need to work through to offer confidence and find out deeply what their concerns are to not coming back, so that we could possibly create an environment where there's greater safeguards for their families. But we're going to work with families. We're in a pandemic. This is one thing that's been a kind of a gift, and there's a lot of silver linings, even though if it feels very challenging, is that it's afforded us to move away from systems because we've always done them a certain way. It's also afforded us the opportunity to be flexible and nimble and adaptable. It's required listening and problem solving to whole new heights. And as I mentioned to Kristen earlier today, after seeing the thoughtful communications that were coming in from employees with concerns, it came forward with professionalism and respect. And I believe those would be the characters that we will bring forward to make decisions, thoughtful decisions together to meet the needs of our kids.
Thanks, Debbie.
All right, thank you for this. I appreciate, and to all my Board of Education colleagues, thanks for the thoughtful questions. I thought this was a great discussion. Again, there's no vote taking place this evening. We have a meeting planned on February 8th where we will consider our return to learn plan once again and hear yet more updates, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So next item on the agenda is citizens present at the meeting, followed by administration member general comments, followed by board member general comments. So I have, I think, 5 citizens so far here. So I'm just going to, in the order that they've come in to me, I am going to call on you and unmute you. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and then please begin by stating your name and your relationship to the district. So first up is Jamie Waterfield. Jamie, you should be unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. Jamie Waterfield. I am a parent of a 5th grader and a 7th grader in the community. I want to make some comments specific to asynchronous learning. You know, there's a lot of conversation today and in the past about this being temporary, but it's also something that keeps coming back up and is likely, as I think Andrea's comments alluded to and other comments, likely to come up again in the future. Asynchronous learning is not learning. It is not adequate in quantity nor quality. It does not meet the needs of our children or families. My 5th grader has yet to take more than an hour of his asynchronous work. The rest of the day is spent playing video games and other activities not supporting his growth or development because both parents have to work, as many families do have 2 working parents, and we have 0 access to additional support. We count our blessings. He's a well-abled 5th grader and not an early elementary or special needs child. My heart goes out to those families. I'm thrilled to hear the dates for 5 full day in person moving ahead, but from past takeaways and discussions, even as recent as today, I'm not optimistic we won't still experience full remote or hybrid again for the rest of this year and possibly into next year as well. Whether that be as a full community or even in pockets of particular schools or subsets of students. So under that premise, I'd like to challenge the district and the board to innovate on ways to provide higher quality and quantity of education in a hybrid model that doesn't include asynchronous, that is more than 2.5 days of learning. Businesses and schools alike across the country have successfully continued serving customers and students in an engaging fashion through the use of video. I cannot accept that an affluent and recognized district like Rochester cannot figure this out 10 months in. How to stream to students at home while teaching the rest of students in the classroom at the same time together. This option doesn't take away from the need for full in-person, but it solves for several challenges, many of which were discussed here today, without much more complexity or cost compared to our current remote option. It also would have saved from virtual only by offering an alternative to those not comfortable sending their children in person. It helps to serve in quarantine situations and also to allow for larger classrooms with teacher shortages. In closing, I want to say I appreciate the challenging situation dealt the board and the district. We're all dealing with it in our own businesses and lives. However, in challenging times is the opportunity to be resilient, innovative, and transformative. To date, I don't feel RCS has risen to that opportunity. I hope we are able to pivot, to listen, to learn, to improve transparency, to put accountability, and deliver quality education to our children once again in the very near future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, I have Dave Recknagel. Dave,
Thank you.
You should be unmuted.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yep.
Well, I'm Dave Recknagel. I have a sophomore who attends Stony Creek High School. I wanted to, in following Jamie, I'm not going to be as eloquent as Jamie. That was extremely well said. But I want to be a little bit more direct. I have 2 questions. I want to ask the first question first. I've sent a couple of emails in, Kristen, to you, and it did take some time to get responses. I know this group is busy, so I appreciate that. But they didn't make the information pack that would be sent out and be shared to the public. And I noticed that I had to fill a certain form out so that would make the information pack. However, there's other emails that I think that were in the 18 that did not follow the same process. So I don't think it requires a response. I would just expect some consistency in the way the board communicates concerns from parents. That's number 1. Number 2 is when this group is talking about some of the facts out there and the science, we need to be clear and not confuse the issues. The CDC recommends our kids should be back in school. It's the safest place for them to be, but yet in our community, we lag behind every other school in our area, Oxford, Lake Orion, Chippewa, and I could go on, Troy, I could go on. We're last amongst the other schools that are going back to hybrid. So I think we're failing in our ability to be bringing our kids back in a timely fashion. That's number two. Also, the comment that was made, I don't know if Debbie made it, I'm not sure who made it, about the masks. The CDC recommends a 2-layer mask, not 2 specific masks. Again, we need to be clear on how we're communicating what the challenges are up there. I live in a world where we're in and out of OEM plants, my team and even myself, on a regular basis. The OEM plants operate incredibly safe, and they can do so with not transmitting the virus. And they have more culpable employees than kids that have a extremely well oiled immune system. So I'm just shocked that we don't talk more about what we're dealing with, and we make this problem bigger than what it is. It's my personal opinion, based on what I see and based on the plants that I visit in North America and the number of flights that I've been on. All of that is extremely safe. Last but not least, I just want to make a comment. In order to keep my son engaged, he has activities every day of the week because school really doesn't challenge him because of the way it's being delivered. He is with other athletes on a regular basis. I actually sent a video to the board just recently on Friday night. Over 100 kids working out. That happens 7 days a week, and on the weekends there's even more. That's the reality that's going on out there outside of school, but yet we talk that if we bring kids together and they're not, specifically 3 or 6 feet apart, they're gonna get a virus, and we're gonna all be, literally not able to attend school again. We need to be a little bit more real of what's going on outside of the walls of the world you live in, the school, and look around us on what's really happening. I don't think we're doing a good job of that. Finally, in closing, I'm just continuing to get disappointed by this board. I don't think there's enough diversity in thought, in questioning and challenge. All I heard was a lot of agreeing across the different members, not enough challenging on why we're not going to school, sooner than what's being planned. And out of respect for the board, I don't think it's your fault. I think you're being directed on what you can and cannot do. But if that's the case, I just wish somebody on the board would challenge wherever that directive's coming from. If it's coming from the state, if it's coming from Governor Whitmore, whoever it's coming from, and stand up and get our kids back to school, because that's what they need. Michael Rice, the superintendent, he's actually written a note regarding the 13,000 students that are missing, from Michigan schools. It's going to grow. Public schools are going to get extremely damaged from this situation unless communities like Rochester step up and do the right thing. You're going to have more people going to private because private schools are thriving. Those kids that are in private are excelling versus our kids, and they can manage it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Next, I have Ellie Skrobazinski.
Yeah, it's her dad, Jim.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, no worries. My daughter uses my Zoom account to attend virtual school, so she changes the name. So there you go.
Thanks.
All right. So I've got a couple of questions that I'll ask, and knowing that I only have 3 minutes, I'm going to ask the questions. And if they were covered during the meeting, my apologies, but just a couple of questions. But what I didn't hear from the meeting is kind of a what if scenario. So what if a kid tests positive for COVID, or if there's a suspected COVID case, do we close the classroom? Do we close the cohort? Do we do contact tracing? Like, how are we attempting to do this different than we've done in the past? I didn't hear that answer. And it seems like if we're going to have any kind of a sustained school attendance, we need to know that answer, for any parent, because, is it the teacher that's calling? Is it the school administrator? Because that could, it's like, how quickly do we respond, and how quickly do we notify parents if there's a case, or if there's a parent with a kid with a case, does that close down the entire school, or is it just the cohort? My daughter's special education in North Hill. So, I mean, contact tracing, good luck. She's in special ed, then she's in GE, then she's in math lab, then she's back in special education. So it'd be a nightmare for that scenario. So I'm more curious of how, what's the flow chart or scenario. And if we don't know, we don't know, but that certainly is something I would hope that gets fleshed out. Secondly, rules for a parent. I know under the old guidance, we started the school year in September of 2 symptoms, and I had to complete a nice little checklist or a text message every morning and go to the website and say, did they exhibit any 2 of these symptoms? In October, it suddenly changed to be 1 symptom. And my child, along with other child who had seasonal allergies, maybe a drip out of the nose, were sent home and not allowed back into school for 3 days until they received a COVID test, which seems absolutely ridiculous that we're following rules that any employer and any other place would not, would follow. Great. I understand health and safety of everybody, but saying that you got a runny nose in October in Michigan, if you're shocked by that, then you haven't lived in Michigan very long. So if we could maybe flesh out kind of, is it 2 symptoms, 1 symptoms? What are we doing going forward as we bring the kids back? Last thing, I do echo kind of, Jamie and Dave's, concerns and comments, with regards to private schools. And I do happen to listen to these meetings, and I know that the firms or the schools district's actuary, projected the charts and showed a drop in enrollment. I hope that that's an early indicator. It's not a black swan event for you guys. It's like we have friends that are within the district that their kids are going every day to private school. And knowing that kindergarten enrollment is down more than 10% for you guys, I do want to see public schools thrive, but it's very difficult to look at next year and think that we're going to, feel comfortable going back if we can't solve some of these things about contact tracing or what we do or what are the rules for a parent that some of these private schools are dealing with every single day. It's not like it's 12 months ago or 11 months ago. So I know I'm coming up on my time. I just want to end with that I was happy to see that the special education was broken out in a separate cohort. They need to attend 5 days a week. Special education kids and parents like myself do not have daycare options. We do not have nanny options. There is no option. It's like we have, for kids with autism like my daughter, I have ABA therapy. That's it. But we can't send our kid to a daycare. We can't find other care. If we bring a nanny in, then that nanny increases the risk to the school because we're going to be bringing in potential contact tracing for that. So to the extent that we can, change cohort C to be 5 days a week, understanding we're moving there for everybody, but we should do it this week. We should be doing it, this Wednesday, because it's just to have a routine for those kids, and Concetta can echo this, it's absolutely critical. And we're talking about 1 room, we're talking about a bathroom in the room. So when we're talking about cleaning, if it's not every 4 hours, if it's something less than that, it seems achievable. So I'll yield my time, but those were the questions that I had for the committee. And just one overall comment that if we can move cohort C to 5 days a week, it would be a great relief for any special education parent and create consistency that would improve the education of special education children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Next, I have Peter Andrew. Peter, you should be unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Peter Andrew. I have a 3rd grader and a 5th grader at Long Meadow. And just separately as a note, I'm a product of Rochester Community Schools. I went to Baldwin, Hart, and Adams. So I love Rochester. I love the community. And I've had some communication with Corey and Kristen. So I just want to thank you both for your outreach. As has been mentioned earlier, there's no playbook for this. So I'm sure at times this feels like a thankless job. But a big change that we've seen recently is that, several of our neighboring districts have returned to full-time instruction. And I guess one of the things that's really been on my mind is just the disparate approaches within Oakland County. So, Debbie, you mentioned all of the things that have to happen, the studying and the building classrooms and looking at the space and, all of these questions that we have to answer before we can go back and how we're not ready. And I guess my main question echoes what's already been said. Why are we so behind other communities? When we have examples like Lake Orion and Troy and Clarkston, if we stick to this timeline of returning to full-time instruction on the 22nd of February, we'll be a full month behind when these other communities have returned to full-time and learning. And, I know a lot of times we kind of work in our own bubble, but there are plenty of examples of public schools across the nation in other states that have been doing this all year and doing so very successfully without driving major outbreaks in the community. So, Debbie and the rest of the board, while I understand that there are questions that have to be answered, I worry that we're getting into sort of a paralysis by analysis mentality. I mean, certainly there are questions to answer, but why are we so far behind our peers in getting our kids back full time? So, and there was also mention that we need to follow the data. And I guess the question that I would ask is the implication that science and data aren't driving the decisions in these other communities in Oakland County? So, this current timeline for February 22nd, to me, is just a huge letdown. And, I'm invested in Rochester Community Schools. Like I said, I'm a product of these schools, but I think we can do better. And, I'll echo what was said earlier. I see a lot of the board members patting each other on the back for, what an awesome job we're doing. I think we can do a lot better than February 22nd. And so, my request would be, let's look for ways to pull this ahead and expedite it, because as was mentioned earlier, asynchronous learning is not learning. As a parent that's observed this, it's not a productive use of these kids' time. And just as a couple more points, on the issue of the variants that are coming out, the CEO of Moderna has come out and said that, this is something that we're going to live with for the rest of our lifetimes. So if we're just, waiting for things to be safe, there will always be new variants. And hopefully there's a virtual environment for those that are at risk, that are, really fearful about returning. But, the other point about trauma and children deserving to feel safe, the biggest trauma that my children have experienced has been, in being deprived of the social interaction at school. And when I picked them up from school today and asked them about their day at school, they said it was the best day ever. So I know that they, I can speak for my family, they would love to be thrown back in full time. That would not traumatize them. That would not be anything that would affect them adversely. What would affect them adversely is prolonging this return to full-time in-person learning.
Thank you. Jessica Opfer. Jessica, you should be unmuted.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. My name is Jessica Opfer, and I'm speaking tonight as a parent of a 3rd grader at North Hill and a 7th grader at Hart. Try to get to the chase here. From what I've read and observed in recent days, a lot of parents feel it is too early to put a date on a return to full-time, full-density in-person learning, particularly when we're now having the new, more contagious variant of the virus lurking, and our teachers and staff are nowhere near being fully vaccinated. Please don't misunderstand. I want my kids in school, and they want desperately to be in school. But putting my kids in school under the hybrid plan at half density and with half days and no lunch at the secondary level is a scenario I'm actually relatively comfortable with. I want to add here that I agree wholeheartedly with Jamie, who spoke earlier about the need to improve the hybrid learning environment and reduce asynchronous learning. I think that's something that we've been asking for a long time, and we need to consider it if we think that there's any chance of hybrid continuing. With that said, I might even be willing to accept my 3rd grader going back full density with only 18 kids in her class and very restricted movement within her school. But at the secondary level, going from half days at half density to full-time, full density with more than 30 students crammed into classrooms all day long and going maskless at lunchtime, that's a huge concern. not just for our kids' safety, but for our teachers and staff as well, who I know you are hearing from. I know they are concerned. To be frank, the distinction that we've been talking about between 3 feet or 6 feet of social distancing, that pretty much goes out the window when you're talking about what happens in the halls of a crowded middle school. And you can bet that there are going to be kids, some kids, who are trying to get away with whatever they can in terms of not wearing their mask properly. I think that Barb's comments earlier hit the nail on the head. As a community, if we want to be back in school, we have to follow all of these requirements to the letter. And as a parent, I'm not hearing that from our community. I do certainly hope that in the coming weeks, you'll be looking very carefully at how successful we are able to operate in the hybrid mode at half density and see if we can even be successful at that. And at the very least, explore more creative options for utilizing our building space, like our gymnasiums and cafeterias, so that we can preserve the distancing guidelines. I know that's been mentioned, but it's been mentioned sort of in passing. I never hear anything specific about that. It really needs to be given serious consideration, and we need to rethink how the kids are moving around the buildings at the secondary level. Finally, I want to mention that I've heard from multiple parents who were at this point planning to keep their kids home during hybrid for many of the concerns that have been discussed, and they are now beginning to feel desperate now that a date has been put on full-time, full-density in-person learning. Parents are talking about keeping their kids home or pulling them out of the district altogether. I've spoken before here about how the virtual campus is not an option for some families, but some building administrators have not been open to exploring alternatives for those kids, even though the district has claimed to be allowing flexibility. It's not happening. Solutions aren't being developed. So there has to be an option for those families, whether it is live streaming or some other solution, in order to allow them access to a fair and equitable education for their kids. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Andrew Weaver.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my name is Andrew Weaver. I have 2 sons at Brooklands. One's in 3rd grade and the other's in TK. So I would say this meeting was actually probably the best as far as hearing some questions and some dialogue. It's probably the one that we should have had prior to September. Many of the things that were brought up were things that parents have been offering to help with and solutions that were ignored. I can provide the emails from multiple parents that offered those, which either got no response or got responses that said that schools are somehow different and that those practices wouldn't be effective. So yeah, as I think echoing a lot of what the parents said prior to me, this is, again, we are at this point because leadership did not step up and make decisions. If you have not watched The Social Dilemma, I really think everyone should, because our board and our district is living in a complete different reality. Multiple times on this call, we heard the references as new challenges. We closed schools in March of last year. The challenges aren't new. They've been in front of us, so we haven't addressed them. And again, the things now you're finally talking about are things that parents offered to help with back before the school year started. But just as the last parent spoke, we are going to run into the same situation of why the plans have been put in place never to get our kids back to in person. We have not addressed that there is an online population that does not feel that the virtual school works for them, whether that's because of AP courses and offerings, and that is where we create the 3 different populations. And that's why we went from having multiple symptoms to 1, because the district set it up to shut the schools back down. Every decision has been made not to get our kids back in school. So as much as we continue to want to hear you guys say, we're doing everything we can, the fact is, as our superintendent once said, actions speak louder than words. The actions you have taken have not led there. The words you guys are saying all sound good, but we flat out have not got it done. And it is absolutely disappointing that we'll continue to see the community divided as our board members, our district leadership continue to operate in a reality that is not the one that the rest of us live in. Simple things like Mike confusing 50 people on a committee is absolutely too many. The people he's referring to are the people that do the job that come out of a committee. So to say that there's 2 people per building and we have to have committees of 50 people, that is just absolutely unreasonable. That is just, again, let's get back to simple, basic things. But the stuff you are talking about now should have been done in September. What is different today than in September? The things you're going to implement, why could we not have implemented them September 1? That's all I have.
Amen.
Kristen, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Comments from the administration. Oh, Debbie, you're muted. There you go.
Sorry, thank you. I just would like to share something for our community that's coming forward for your families. The Rochester Community Schools and the Neighborhood House have been really looking for opportunities to innovate and offer some virtual classes for our community. There will be some flyers that will be coming out, but just so that you know what is underway, there will be yoga beginning February 9th. It'll run 6 weeks through March 18th. It will be available for TK through 5 on Tuesdays, grades 6 through 12 on Thursdays, and teachers and staff on Wednesdays. Another opportunity coming in April, our kids can cook nutrition courses for ages 9 to 12-year-old middle school. We'll be working with the Ascension dietitians to help us move through that program. We're targeting students 15 and up for a Ready to Work program and a Ready for College program. So we thank the community for helping us to provide some innovation and some connections in partner with Neighborhood House. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from administration or board member final comments? Michelle.
Hi, I just want to let anyone know who's watching that the Rochester Area Youth Assistance, along with the Rochester Hills Public Library, has a program on Thursday, February 18th at 7 p.m. And it's entitled Culture and Identity. And you can register on the Rochester Hill Public Library website, and a flyer email will be going out hopefully in the next couple days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen, I had one addition. The city of Rochester Hills is sponsoring a public art contest for elementary, or not elementary, but K through 12 students in the area. And you can find out more information about it on the Paint Creek Center for the Arts website, pccart.org. And the Auburn Road Corridor, which the city just recently enhanced, they're sponsoring this project, and they're encouraging local students to get involved. They're going to be choosing 20 pieces of student artwork to install in that section of the city. And so I think it's a great partnership between the city, our local art center, Paint Creek, and our local students here. So again, you can check out more information about it. It's called Art on Auburn, and it's at Paint Creek Center for the Arts website.
Thank you. Any other comments from administration or board members? All right, so our next meeting, as we've mentioned a few times, is February 8th. And we will also have a work session on February 22nd. Those are both Monday. At this time, I believe those are both still planned as virtual meetings. That could change. One of the issues with a pivot to in-person meeting is access for the community. We think there's a great interest in the work that we're doing, the things that we're talking about to the community, and we want to still allow the community a chance to not only watch live, but interact if they want to. And so we're looking at a way to make that as safe as possible when we do pivot back to an in-person meeting. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting at 9:49 p.m. Moved by Barb, seconded by Michelle. And all those in favor, please unmute and say aye.
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 Opposed? None. And so meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you, everyone.